The elaborate bronze-fitted public fountains of pre-reset European and North American city centers were not charitable installations for the poor. Charitable provision for the poor does not get hydraulic engineering of that sophistication. The physical evidence points to primary water distribution infrastructure, the system everyone used before metered municipal water made water a product. And when the modernization campaigns came, they didn't demolish the fountains. They disconnected them from the subsurface systems that made them work, left the decorative shells in place, and called it an upgrade. I want to tell you about water pressure, specifically about the relationship between water pressure and the height of a water source above the point of delivery. This is basic hydraulics. Water flows from higher to lower elevations under the force of gravity, and the pressure at the delivery point is proportional to the height difference between the source and the delivery. A water tower 50 feet high delivers water at a specific pressure. A water tower 100 feet high delivers it at higher pressure. Simple, fundamental, the basis of every gravity-fed water distribution system in history. Now I want to ask you about a specific category of pre-reset public fountain. The elaborate bronze-fitted fountains that appear in historical photographs of European and North American city centers in the mid-19th century. The fountains that were, in many cases, spectacular. Jets of water rising to considerable heights, multiple simultaneous streams, complex spray patterns whose achievement required not just water pressure but carefully designed nozzle geometry. Fountains that, in some documented cases, produced jets of 10, 15, 20 feet in height, continuously. Not as timed events, not as managed demonstrations, but as continuous features of the urban landscape, available throughout the day. To produce a continuous jet of 10 feet requires a water source at a specific minimum height above the fountain's nozzle. To produce 20 feet requires roughly double that. These heights, translated into the hydraulic infrastructure required to maintain them continuously in a 19th century city, require a water supply system of specific capacity and pressure. A system whose scale, whose infrastructure requirements, is not consistent with the water supply systems that the official history of 19th century urban water provision describes as existing in the cities where these fountains were operating. The official history of 19th century urban water supply in most American and European cities describes systems that were barely adequate for the basic requirements of drinking and sanitation, let alone for the ornamental excess of 20-foot fountain jets. The Croton Aqueduct in New York, completed in 1842, and one of the most ambitious water supply projects of the era, delivered water at pressures and volumes that made the city's basic water requirements manageable, but that were not generous by any subsequent standard. The water supply systems of most other American cities in the same period were less ambitious, less comprehensive, less capable. And yet the fountains in these cities, in the historical photographs that document them, appear to have been operating at pressures that the official water supply infrastructure could not have produced. Where was the pressure coming from? This is the hydraulic question that the official history of the pre-reset fountains does not answer. The fountains were connected to water supplies. The water supplies had specific pressure characteristics. The fountain performances documented in historical photographs required specific pressure inputs. The documentation of the official water supply systems does not provide the pressure inputs that the documented fountain performances required. The gap between the documented input and the documented output is the evidence of something the official history doesn't account for. Let me propose a specific mechanism, not as a certain answer, but as a hypothesis consistent with the evidence. The pre-reset fountains were not simply distributing water pressure from a distant source. They were, in some cases, generating it locally, using the movement of water through specific nozzle geometries, through specific pressure chamber configurations, through specific arrangements of the plumbing systems to which they were connected to produce output pressures that exceeded the input pressure of the supply system. This is not a violation of thermodynamics. It is a description of specific hydraulic phenomena, some of which are well documented in the physics of fluid dynamics, the Venturi effect, the behavior of water in resonant chambers, the pressure amplification achievable through specific nozzle designs that use the kinetic energy of the incoming flow to produce a higher velocity output. These effects are real. They are documented in physics. They are not capable, in any standard engineering analysis, of producing the degree of pressure amplification that the pre-reset fountain performances suggest. But they point toward a tradition of hydraulic engineering knowledge that was, by the evidence of the surviving fountain designs, more sophisticated than the standard history of 19th century hydraulics acknowledges. A tradition of specific knowledge about how water behaves in specific configurations, how pressure can be managed and amplified through specific design choices, that the engineers who designed the pre-reset fountains possessed, and that the engineers who replaced them with the metered municipal system did not. The specific features of the pre-reset fountains that were removed first in the modernization campaigns of the 1860s through 1900s were the plumbing configurations that were most anomalous from the perspective of standard hydraulic engineering: the pressure chambers, the specific nozzle arrangements, the underground plumbing systems that connected the fountains to each other and to larger water management structures, in ways that the official description of those structures as simple drainage or supply systems does not account for. These features were removed. The fountains were often physically maintained as decorative structures, as the historical photographs of the late 19th century show. The same ornate bronze basins, the same elaborate sculptural programs, the same civic centerpieces, but disconnected from the plumbing systems that had made them function as something more than decorative water features. Running, when they ran at all, on the municipal water supply at the ordinary pressure of the municipal system, not producing the 20-foot jets, not functioning as whatever they had been functioning as when they were connected to the subsurface systems that the modernization campaigns had removed or capped. The fountains were not demolished because they were ugly or because they failed to provide water. They were maintained, aesthetically, as civic monuments. What was removed was their connection to the infrastructure that made them work in the way the pre-reset tradition had designed them to work. The removal was surgical. The visible fountain remained. The subsurface systems that powered it were removed or capped, and the fountain was reconnected to the municipal supply at ordinary pressure. The civic monument survived. The technical function was severed. Why? The same answer I keep arriving at from different directions. The technical function of the pre-reset fountain, whatever it was beyond the provision of free drinking water, was embedded in the hydraulic infrastructure of the pre-reset energy and water management system. The subsurface systems that connected the fountains to each other and to larger management structures were part of the same integrated infrastructure that powered the buildings and provided the heat and managed the electromagnetic environment of the pre-reset city. The fountains were nodes in that system. Visible, accessible, publicly legible nodes whose function was in part the distribution of water, but whose role in the larger system was part of an integration that the new administrative order could not maintain, and therefore had to disconnect. The disconnection was the modernization. The metered municipal water supply was not an upgrade to the pre-reset system. It was a replacement of the pre-reset system with something the new administration understood and could control. Something that charged for access. Something that was not integrated into the other systems of the pre-reset city. Something that was just water pipes delivering water at ordinary pressure, without the hydraulic sophistication and the systemic integration that the pre-reset fountains had embodied. The fountains that survive in the city squares of the old world cities are beautiful. Their bronze is still eloquent. Their sculptural programs still speak to those who know the iconographic vocabulary they're using of the tradition that produced them. What they no longer do is what they were built to do. The plumbing that connected them to each other, to the subsurface systems, to the integrated infrastructure of the pre-reset city, was removed more than a century ago. The fountains run on municipal water now. Decorative, disconnected, evidence of a system that was systematically dismantled, starting with the subsurface connections that made it work, and ending with a decorative remnant that nobody asks about because the question of what they were really doing has not, in the century and a half since the disconnection, been seriously asked. If the pre-reset fountain networks were nodes in a larger integrated hydraulic and energy infrastructure, and if the modernization campaigns specifically removed the subsurface connections while preserving the visible shells, what were those fountains actually doing beyond distributing drinking water? And what does it mean that the disconnection happened at the same time as the installation of metered systems? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who has never questioned why city fountains stopped working as well as they used to.